Well, we're now joined by our political panel to talk about this. Susan Smith is co-founder and principal at the Blue Sky Strategy Group. Jordan Paquet, a senior consultant at the same firm. Anne McGrath, principal secretary to the NDP leader. Hello to the three of you.
Michael.
Hello.
So, here we are, the end of the spring session, and I just want to do a quick go-around, if you will, about a minute or so with each of you, talking about what you think each party has accomplished. Anne, I'll talk about the NDP with you, Jordan about the Conservatives, but Susan, I'll begin with you. When you look at this spring session between January and now, what have the Liberals been able to accomplish?
I think there's some things that are actually concrete for Canadians, like dental care. It's now kicked into gear, and there are people who are benefiting from it. I think that the introduction of the pharmacare piece, where diabetes drugs and reproductive or birth control are covered, that's something concrete for people. There have been, 15 pieces of legislation, I think, that have been introduced. They haven't all passed, but there's some concrete things. The foreign interference legislation has been introduced. A big budget came through, maybe royal assent today, I think, potentially on that. So there are some of the standard things that they're supposed to accomplish, but I think from pharmacare, dental care, some of the big initiatives on housing and the deals that they've been doing with the provinces and municipalities are actually things that are concrete and touch Canadians' homes. The last thing, and take it for what it's worth, is the rebranding, I think, of the Canadian carbon credit. Is that what it's called now? Everybody will see it in their bank account July 15th, and they'll see at least a line item instead of Canada or whatever it used to say before. Okay,
Jordan, what would you say about the Conservatives and what they've been able to accomplish?
Well, certainly they've been able to be laser focused on their message. Issues around cost of living, issues around crime, different matters of corruption inside of government. I mean, those have been their main focuses so far. And they've done a great job day in, day out really communicating that. And I think that's gone to show inside the polls lately, and just being so consistent there. So yeah, no, they've certainly been able to press that issue, keeping caucus united, keeping them focused on that. They've been able to expose some different issues inside of government that has really knocked government off message. So I think that's something that you'll see them continue to do throughout the summer as well, is just going out and continue to talk about issues around affordability.
Okay, so Liberals, Conservatives, let's bring in New Democrats. What do you think the party's been able to accomplish?
Well, I mean, when we talk about the things that have been accomplished in this session, many of those were initiatives of the NDP. I mean, the NDP ran 2 federal election campaigns on dental care. We didn't win either of those election campaigns, but we now have dental care. So, we said we wanted to do it. We worked hard to get it done, and it's being done. I think pharmacare is going to be a game changer. I think that diabetes medication and devices and birth control, those things are absolutely going to be significant for so many Canadians. So I think those are 2 really big pieces that I think we have to talk about quite a lot, and we have to make sure that people know that it was because we made this happen. It was the NDP that pushed for that. And much of the legislation that has happened in this spring session was legislation that the NDP has been pushing for.
Mm-hmm. Pushing for, of course, the Supply and Confidence Agreement. But, regardless of what has been accomplished, though, what hasn't really changed are the polling numbers. And, Conservatives still have a very commanding lead, Liberals trailing by double digits, the NDP behind the Liberals, not that far behind, but behind the Liberals. Is the public mood set then, regardless of what's happening here in Ottawa, is the public mood set in terms of what party, what leader they're supporting right now?
For the moment, I think people aren't, it's not a, existential question for people. They're about to go into summer, their kids are coming off school, they're worried about what am I going to do for daycare, what am I going to do for summer plans?
Even before, it's been consistent.
Sure, but I don't think, what was the Prime Minister's, people aren't, he said something earlier this week, people aren't in a deciding mood these days. It's a long time before the next election. October 2025 is a long way away. Even if it was called a year from now, that's still 12 months away. Things can change. Interest rates are changing how people feel. Opposition leaders can step in big steaming piles of trouble as well. So I don't think people have made up their minds forever at this stage of the game because they don't have to. And for the interim, I think people just give quick pat answers until it's time to focus in on who's going to be leading my country in the next go-through.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to that, Jordan?
Yeah, no, it has been consistent for the last year. I mean, the Conservatives have had a commanding lead, and I think that's now baked in. Canadians have decided that they want to change, and that's quite clear. So there is still some time for the election, and Justin Trudeau's been underestimated before, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to find a path forward for him, and I think that's going to be what the Liberals will be talking about this summer, is how do they rebuild from here? How do they regain control of the agenda? Because everything they've tried so far has not worked. They've tried some big issues in the budget, other issues that they've worked with the NDP on, but nothing's really stuck. It hasn't percolated down to Canadians, and that's, I would assume, will continue.
Yeah, and what would you say to the numbers? Because I know, for example, the Liberals were talking about basically trying to incrementally improve their numbers as the summer approached, but that hasn't happened. In fact, the Conservatives have been able to increase the lead. So is the situation, as Jordan suggests here, baked in now that Canadians have made a decision on this?
I have never seen polling numbers bake in, between elections. I think that we have seen so many elections where people would have predicted the outcome prior to the election, and that is not what happens. Like, it's just over and over and over again. There's so many examples of that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that things are baked in, but I would say that what I see from the polling data is that people are very concerned and worried and anxious about affordability. I think that they are looking at the housing crisis and the inability to be able to afford a place to live, and the rising cost of food and the grocery bills. I think that there is a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, and I think that's probably what we're seeing in the polls. I don't know if there's any solutions coming out of any of that yet, but definitely I have seen. So I mean, I think I've said this before, but we had an election campaign in British Columbia in 2013 where the front page of the Vancouver Sun or the Vancouver Province maybe had a photo of the NDP leader that said, "This man could kick a dog and he would still be premier." And that's not what happened. Christy Clark won that election. Mm-hmm. So I'm not, I've just seen this happen so many times before. When the 2011 election, we've talked about that before, it was, at least the media was predicting that Michael Ignatieff was going to win. And that's not what happened. So I've just seen it too many times to ever actually do much more, take the horse race numbers and translate those into electoral outcomes. Yeah, but I do believe that what those polls reflect is the increasing anxiety and worry that people have about particularly about their economic future, their ability to afford a standard of living that is reasonable. Yeah,
well, it's interesting because of course on Monday will be the Toronto St. Paul's by-election, and when you read what journalists are hearing on the ground, it is very much an anxiety about what's happening right now, questions about which leader do they actually want to support, and this is a Liberal stronghold. This is Fortress Toronto for the Liberals, in particular this riding, been Liberal since the days of Jean Chrétien. So what then does each party leader have to do? Here we have wrapping up the spring session. Again, to your point, Jordan, the Liberals have tried a number of different things in the window to try to change the poll numbers. That has not happened. The Conservatives still very much have a lead. So what does each party leader have to do? I'll begin with you, Susan, and with the government.
I think they actually all have to do the same thing, and that's go knock doors. Tell your people to go knock doors, listen to people, employ, deploy, execute on what you're hearing as what is practical. And the last bit is don't screw up, right? You have to get a bunch of things right, but you also have to make sure you don't get things wrong. And I think every party leader has got to go out, listen to people, be seen talking to people, hearing people, interacting with people, and in a genuine, authentic way, and connecting with voters and being able to come back, connect with his or her own caucus as well, and be able to internalize and execute on what they're hearing from people. Because this is the last next summer will be a campaign summer. This is a gear up, get loaded, listen hard, get ready to prepare, and then go next year.
Get loaded in non-alcoholic sense. I'm assuming. Sense. Okay. Jordan, I
don't know about tonight.
I'll see you on Spark Street. What do you say, Jordan? What does the Conservative leader have to do for this summer?
I think he has to stay consistent, stay on message, and he's been successful being able to do that so far. He's outside the House. He's the one that's going to be really controlling what's said. So it's not going to be certain caucus members that might veer off message. Once in a while, they do quickly come back in line if the ones that do veer off. But no, he'll be out there. He'll be doing what he does. They're really focused on the West Coast, focused in Atlantic Canada, areas they think they can really pick up seats. There's seats in play down in Atlantic, where I'm from, that have never been considered conservative before, at least since the days of Brian Mulroney. And they're just recruiting good candidates, continuing to raise big amounts of money, and So it's just consistency, keeping that moving forward.
Okay, I'll pick up on a second on that. But Anne, what do you think the NDP has to do?
Well, I agree with a lot of what's been said, that all party leaders have to do, they have to listen to people. But I think listening to people is really important, because it's very easy in Ottawa to get to think that what's happening in Ottawa is what's happening in the rest of the country, and it is absolutely not. And you will find people who are not, you think something, you're seized with something, and you go and knock on a door in Winnipeg, and that's not what people are talking about, right? So I think the summer is a great opportunity to listen to people and to break out of the Ottawa bubble and think about things, and how people are experiencing things. And governments, and I think this government as well as other governments, think that when they're spending a lot of money on something, people should be thankful for it. But if they're not actually seeing the affordable apartments and the affordable homes and the prices coming down at the grocery store and that kind of thing, doesn't matter what's in the budget if those things are not being experienced in real life. And this is an opportunity for the leaders and their members of parliament and their candidates to be listening to Canadians. And the other thing that they have to do, and it's also consistent with what's been said already, is I think it's that they're going to have to focus a little bit more on their electoral machine. Make sure that they have, that they're getting good candidates, that those candidates are getting nominated, and that those candidates are starting to work hard. Because you can't it's pretty hard to get nominated a week before an election writ and actually get elected.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of time, so I just want to quickly ask, though, because you're talking about being consistent for the Conservative Party. How much of that is for Canadians to still know Pierre Poilievre? Because I think when you look at the numbers, the Conservatives are doing rather well, but based on what we're hearing from the on the ground in the Toronto St. Paul's riding, people still have questions about who Pierre Poilievre is.
Sure, but I think he's been quite consistent. I mean, he's been on the scene for quite a while, as a senior minister, and now as a leader. He was a prominent opposition critic as well. So, he's been making the rounds, going out there, and I think he's really talking about the issues that Canadians are caring about. Issues around affordability, that is the top of mind issue. So he's been able to punch through in certain ways that we haven't been able to do before. Since when did we have a Conservative leader that has made housing a number one issue? That used to be an issue that parties on the left focused on much more. So I think he's been able to really sort of take some of these issues, make them Conservative issues, and allow Canadians to focus on them.
I think you're going to see Poilievre's people almost running a front-runner campaign with him where they don't put him way out there, because I think they'll put him in select spots, super controlled environments, 2 questions from friendly journalists, that's it, and maybe some friendly town halls. But I don't think they need people to get to know him a whole big bunch. The way the polls are at this current moment in time, people know Trudeau. They're not happy at the moment. They don't know the other guy, and I actually think that's to Poilievre's advantage. He's not always that likable when you scratch below the surface there. So I think it'll be interesting to see how much of a front-runners campaign mode they are in.
Okay, last word.
I suspect that what they'll do is they'll spend a lot of money. I mean, what we saw in this last period of time was that even though Mr. Poilievre comes out and attacks journalists and doesn't react well to criticism, his ads present a different picture. And so I think that what the Conservatives probably have to do is they have to keep spending that money on advertising to show him in a better light, because it is not the experience of people who actually have contact. And I know that that's for sure the case with a lot of the press gallery and a lot of the journalists. And now he'll be out across the country, and if he starts punching down on some of the local journalists who might not be familiar with that particularly aggressive style, that will actually take root a little bit more. So, I mean, I think that this is going to be a very, very important summer. I think that it's right that it is probably the last one where you're not really in full election mode. So it is important to actually be in election mode anyway.
Okay. Well, we will be watching and working. But thank you, Susan, Jordan, and thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.